Hello everyone, welcome back to my channel, and today let's paint those beautiful daffodils. If you want to skip the sketching part, you may find the outline in my Etsy shop. I will leave the link in the description. I also want to say thank you to everyone who already have purchased the outlines on my Etsy shop. It really means a lot for me and it motivates me very much. Thank you guys for your support. So now let's start with the center of the flowers, and I'm going to cover all of them with permanent yellow dip. And today we're painting with a photo reference that I found on Pinterest. So that's what you should always have in mind, what you see in this photo, because it shows us the shadows, where we should put the shadows, where the picture is darker, where it's lighter. So use it as a map for your painting. Here I'm using some orange color and I blend it well with a clean wet brush, and I try to show the texture of the center of the flower. And with raw umber I'm going to add the shadow. At the very center it should be darker, and after I just blend and difuminate very well the color with a wet brush, and after I lift up some color so I can show the texture. And you should lift up the color several times, because if you do it just once it won't be visible. So you do it several times because the painting always want to come back because it's very wet, and if you do it several times, well, you can see the result. Now with another floor we are adding the shadow again with the same raw umber, and I'm also adding a little bit of greenish yellow, just a little bit, because if you add a lot of green in the shadow when you paint yellow flowers, it becomes sometimes dirty. It looks a bit dirty sometimes, so just a little bit of green in the shadow. And again raw umber for the shadow of the center of the third flower. Now let's move to the petals, and this time I'm going to use only two colors. It's Payne's Gray and Yellow Ochre. I'm going to mix them in different proportions, and I prefer to paint shadow with more Payne's Gray because it's like a cold color, and for me shadow normally is cold. And the light I'm going to paint with more ochre. So that's what I'm going to do now. I'm going to cover every petal with some like natural color, and I'm going to try already to show the texture and the shadows. I'm always using the photo reference to see where the light goes and where the dark color goes, so you should do the same. This petal is the darkest one, so I'm going to use more Payne's Gray in this one, and it's just the first layer. In my watercolor I use a lot of layers, so after I'm going to make it darker. This one is one of the lightest petals, so I'm using a lot of water and a lot of ochre, and I'm lifting some color that I don't need there. This one also is quite it's not very dark, it's not in the shadow, just a half of this petal is in the shadow. And now I'm going to paint the texture. I'm painting it with a little bit of a little more of Payne's gray, and as it's still a little bit wet, we can see how beautifully blended this texture. Now I'm checking if the other petal is already dry, but it's not, so I'm going to cover the petals of this flower with mostly yellow ochre with just a tiny bit of Payne's gray. If I see that I added too much color, I'm cleaning my brush, I'm drying it out with towel paper, and I'm lifting the color, and you can see that it's very nice, very beautiful. Now on the third flower, we almost don't have semi-shadow, we only have shadow and light, because the source of light goes right to this flower. So here we're going to use very little of paint. Basically we need just to show the shadows, and I'm going to paint very dark background, so you will see after how it illuminates the flowers and how they become automatically very white, even if now they don't look like very white. Don't worry, don't be scared. After you paint the background, it will look much brighter. Okay, now I'm going to show you and explain you in details how I paint the texture and the shadows of the petal, of the next petal. Now it's a real speed of how I paint. I take the paint and I'm start painting the line that I see on the photo reference, here and here, and in some parts it's like wider, in some parts it's slimmer. I always check on the reference how it looks like, and I always try to make all those lines different. Now I clean the brush, I dry it a little bit with the paper towel, and I'm going to blend some of the edges of the lines I made. I'm going to blur them so they don't look such aggressive, let's say it this way. And I'm going to add here a little bit more shadow. It was too much of paint, so I just took off some of it with a paper towel, and I blurred again what I just painted. And this line also I'm going to add here a little bit more of painting, so it doesn't look such bright and lonely there. And now I'm going to blur again with a clean and almost dry brush. When our brush is dry, it helps us to take off the excess of the color of the paint. If we have too much paint on the paper, we still have time to take it away, to take it off. Okay, so that's what I'm going to do with every petal. I think with some of them I'm going to make the same. I'm going to explain it with details how I'm painting them. Basically the steps are the same for all of the petals. I check the reference, I define where I'm going to put the shadow and where I'm going to add the flower, the petal texture, and after I start painting, and I always try to blur the lines. I'm trying to make them different. Some are wider, some are brighter, because it's what makes the painting interesting to look at, I think. I like how this petal turned out, so I'm going to explain how I did it in a real speed. With equal proportion of paints gray and yellow ochre, I'm starting to paint the shadow, and we can see here that this shadow is from another petal from another flower. So I'm going to leave it like this. I'm not going to blur the edge of the shadow. I'm going to leave the line like I have it now. Now I'm cleaning the brush and I'm drying it a little bit, but I still have painting on my brush, so I'm adding the shadow here and I'm adding the texture here with a little bit of paint that I have left on my brush, with very soft movements, and that's it. I like how it looks. It looks very nice, I think. And after it dries, I'm going to add there a little bit more of dark lines, so it looks even deeper. Now I want to make that darker the center again. Actually, it didn't look bad, but I decided that I need to add more shadow here, and I used light red this time with a little bit of green that I had on my palette, and it looks darker on the edges of the center, so lifted up some of the color in the center on the center. And on these flowers, well, I'm going to add a little bit more of shadow here, again using the light red with a little bit of green that I have on my palette. Here I'm adding a little bit of orange and I'm blurring it very well. Now the stems, I'm going to cover first all three of them with yellow green. Now I'm going to mix some dark cold green, and here I'm using Hawker's green, indigo, and ultramarine a little bit, and just painting the shadows of the stems. It's actually the shadow everywhere because they should be quite dark here. I'm not going to spend a lot of time painting them, so don't worry about this. You can just cover them all with the color that you mix. Just use in some parts more this color, in some parts less, in some parts use more water, so you avoid the stems to be boring this way. And now I'm adding some shadows, more shadows on the stems with indigo. And here I'm using burnt umber to add this little shadow. Now I'm going to mix something very dark for the background. I'm using a lot of indigo, I'm using some green. It can be actually any green that you want. I'm using paint green as well. Adding there a little bit of uh, I think it's raw umber or yellow ochre. Oh no, it's yellow ochre because it's opaque. And I'm going to cover very carefully the background. Please procure to use a lot of water in your painting on this stage, because if you don't, it will dry out very fast and it will leave some lines that you don't want to have. So just use a lot of water, and I had to cover the background 2 times to have this like a deep color. Here I'm already using red, uh, light red and red brown mixed together, because I decided to make it even darker, this poor center of this flower. So I'm also trying to have here like the texture of the center, because it has some uh, lines and some shadows, and I'm trying to paint them here. So yes. Now here I'm just trying to like blend this little dot that I accidentally put there while I was painting the background. And here soften some edges again. And basically it's almost done. I'm just going to add a little bit more of shadow here, and I'm going to blend it, of course, as always. And basically that's it. I hope that you enjoyed this tutorial. I hope that everything was clear. If not, please let me know in the comments. um, don't forget that you can find the outline in my Etsy shop, and please subscribe, like, and thank you for your attention, and see you next time. Bye.